Hi all, welcome and thank you for joining us tonight for our evening webinar, Writing and Showrunning from Home. My name is Amy Sullivan. I'm a College of Communications graduate, a current member of the Boston University Young Alumni Council, and I'm a fellow writer myself. So obviously, like most of you, I've been sitting on the same place on my couch for months, trying to rack my brain on ways to stay creative and ways to stay relevant in the industry. Today's webinar is sponsored by the Boston University Alumni Association and is offered to our 339,000 alumni across the globe. Before we begin, I'd like to welcome the almost 400 alumni joining us for this webinar, which is huge, including members of the BU community joining us from around the world, including places like Mumbai, Los Angeles, London, South Africa, Canada, Boston, New York, Nashville, Germany, Atlanta, and many, many more. Thank you all so much for being here. Okay, let's go over a few housekeeping things before we begin. Tonight's webinar is being recorded and will soon be available for an on-demand viewing on the Alumni Association website. So in case anyone misses it or in case you want to send it to any of your friends or alumni, it's going to be there. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit them throughout the discussion by typing them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Mouse over to your Zoom screen to reveal the toolbar at the bottom and then select Q&A. We're going to do our best to get through as many as we can, but obviously there's a ton of you, which is great, so we might not have time, but we will try. Okay, it's my pleasure. We're going to introduce a fellow alumni of the College of Communications, Hilary Weisman Graham. She is the creator and showrunner of the upcoming Netflix anthology series, Social Distance. And in her career, she has also written and produced for Orange is the New Black, Kidding, Bones, and she's also written a YA novel. Hilary, great to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming and for staying up super late. If you're in Europe or even on the East Coast, it's late for me. So yeah, I'm here to talk about show running remotely, and I'll get into that experience. But before I do, I'll just launch in a little bit to tell you about my journey from BU to now. It has many chapters. So chapter 1, settle in. No, it's kind of an exciting story. It's a Hollywood story. There's a lot of failure and a lot of recovery. So chapter 1 is I graduated from BU. Was very into and excited by independent films that were a little bit left of center, sort of low budget art house kind of thing. And I realized very quickly that it would take years to sort of work my way up. I wanted to be a director, by the way. I did not want to be a writer. I mean, I was writing, and I did write my first feature film and my second feature film, but I thought of myself as a director most of all. So the year after I graduated, I ended up writing, directing, and producing my first feature film called Life's Too Good that got into a lot of film festivals and had some nice reviews in important magazines, but ultimately did not get distribution, which was crushing to me at age 23, 24. And it was, I'd thrown everything into it, my heart, my soul, every bit of money I had. I'd raised money for, hitting up like old professors and like my pediatrician and my cousins and that kind of thing. And then a few years after that, I was living in Boston at the time still. And a few years after that, I made my second indie feature. That one did a little bit better in that it sold to PBS in Boston, WGBH, and so it was seen by people, but once again, it got into like a bunch of festivals, but none of the important festivals. And it got some nice reviews, but it did not turn me into Spike Lee or Richard Linklater or or Quentin Tarantino or name your, successful 90s indie filmmaker. And then I met my husband right around the time my second film was coming out. And I was like, screw it all, like I'm done with filmmaking. And in the meantime, I had been working in Boston in the documentary world as a freelancer. So I was earning my keep in television, but it wasn't filmmaking was my passion. And then, in my 28-year-old wisdom, I was like, I failed and I'm done. And so I was in love, and my husband and I moved to New Hampshire, and I was like, I'm done with this. And then got married and had my son and bought a house, and we had a very nice, quiet life. And I was working at WMUR, which is a news station in Manchester, New Hampshire. And then I quit when my son was born, and I was like, well, now I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I'm going to put all of it behind me. Like, I don't ever have to do anything creative again. I can just focus on being a mom, which was wonderful, but also there was something in me that was like, this is not it for you. There's something more. And I started writing during my son's nap time, and really got into, I was writing like essays, and tried to produce like a This American Lifestyle piece on something. Anyway, I was getting creative again, and it wasn't quite done. I had a lot of unfinished business. So then somebody sent me an email. I do not remember who, but it was about a reality show that Mark Burnett, who produces every reality show ever, was doing with Steven Spielberg. And it was called On the Lot, and it was going to be like American Idol, but for filmmakers. And my son was 2.5 at the time, and I had no childcare. And my husband took him out for breakfast. And I said to myself, if I can think of an idea to make a short film to submit to this thing in the time that they are out for breakfast, then I'll enter it. Then I'll make a little film and enter it. Cause like, what the hell? So not only did I think of an idea, I wrote a script. I mean, it was a short, but wrote a script by the time they came home, and I managed to take a shower, which was also very important. When you have a toddler, it's hard to find time to shower. And I did it all. And 2 weeks later, the movie was made. And then long story short, 12,000 people applied to this thing, and I was one of the 18 contestants selected. And I spent 2 months living on the CBS lot at Radford in Studio City as a contestant on the show, which was one of the best and worst experiences of my life. But it was life-changing for many reasons, but one, it was incredible to get positive feedback about my work from people I really admired, like Gary Marshall or Carrie Fisher, who the first time I met her had seen one of my short films and was like, my girl. And I was like, what is she talking to me? It was just that kind of validation that you have this inkling, you're like, maybe I'm really like cool and good and can do the thing like somebody like that. And then I don't know. So that was really affirming. And then also I realized during this experience competing on national television that I didn't want to be a director, that I was a writer, that I loved writing, and I wanted to do that all along. So by the time I got kicked off the island and sent back to New Hampshire, I was like, I was the last female director remaining in the competition. Then it was a bunch of dudes. Just like real Hollywood. And then I went back home to New Hampshire, and I was like, I'm going to be a writer. This is what I want to do. I'm going to write books. I'm going to write screenplays. And I wrote a little manifestation. I know it's very dorky, a little like index card, and I put it on my computer. And then after 7 long years of really hard work, I got a manager after being on the show, and I started, I sold a screenplay, but it wasn't in the Writers Guild. And then I got in the Guild. I wrote a movie for Disney Channel, but it wasn't made. And then I wrote a pilot for Lifetime, but it wasn't made. And like every year from New Hampshire, from a tiny town in the middle of nowhere, New Hampshire, I was, getting more and more work. And finally I said to my husband, I'm like, I'm not getting any younger. Like, I'm either going to give this a real shot so I can like be in a writer's room, or just be happy with like writing a Lifetime pilot once every 2 years or something. And he's like, no, let's do it. So he was like the stable, like income and health insurance guy. And I was the person who occasionally earned money. And this is 6 years ago in 2014. I came out for staffing season. It was my second staffing season. By this point I had an agent. And I came out for staffing season, and I got a job on Bones. And that was in May of 2014. And in like June 8th or 9th of 2014, I started on Bones. And that was as a staff writer in my early 40s. And I got staff from New Hampshire. All these things people said could never happen. So, and immediately it was very clear that this is where I was meant to be. And then the big trick was from Bones, as much, listen, I'll always love Bones. You'll always remember your first. I love Bones. It was a great experience, a really great writer's room and great people, and not my favorite show in the world. Like, I love Bones, but it's not like it's not really my aesthetic and what I wanted to write. So the trick was, oh shoot, can I get something that feels like me? And then I remember very clearly the moment my agent called me to tell me that I had a meeting with Jenji Kohan and Tara Herman for Orange is the New Black. I was so excited. I was in the car living in LA, going to a soccer tournament with my son, that my son told all of his little friends at school that I had gotten the job. I'm like, oh, I just have a meeting. That's how excited I was. I was like, don't blow it. And I went into the meeting just like, oh, okay, I just have to not blow it. They already like my writing. And I got the job. And that was a life-changing job as well. And I spent the last 2 seasons of the show on Orange. And then after that went directly to Kidding on Showtime, starring Jim Carrey. And then directly from Kidding back to Jenji Kohan's camp in this incubator with some of my Orange is the New Black colleagues, where I developed a show that we pitched to Netflix and didn't sell. And that was a bummer. And then what was happening after that? Didn't sell. And then I got another writing gig, writing a feature for Disney Plus. And then the pandemic hit. And
yes.
Yes, remember
I've heard of that.
Yeah. So I'm going to just jump in, Amy, if it's okay, and talk about how I sold the show, Social Distance. So, I mean, I came to LA and I've had a lot of success in a very short amount of time, which I'm very grateful for. It was very hard earned. As you might tell by my story of like 20 years of like failure and struggle and trying to break in. I mean,
hard work and tenacity, Hilary.
Well, really, it is hard work and tenacity. And I tell my son all the time, like, it's really just perseverance. Like, no matter how many times you get knocked down, you just have to stand back up. And I did that. And as I did it, I got better and better and better at what I do. And so anyway, back to our pandemic. So I was supposed to have a big party at my house, a birthday party for myself, the weekend the pandemic hit. So that got canceled. And which, in the scheme of things, didn't matter at all. Like, it seemed like it was going to matter, and then it didn't. But I was just still sort of, we were all like, what's happening? Our lives were, they canceled public school all across America, across the world. We couldn't figure out what the fuck was happening. Sorry, am I not supposed to swear? But I started panicking because I'm prone to being paranoid and panicking. And on Monday, March 16th, I was like, oh no, my Disney Plus movie I'm supposed to write, my income now, it's going to fall apart. Why are they going to pay me to write a movie that they can never shoot? And when's the next time they're going to have 200 people in a, soundstage to shoot a movie or TV show? And out of that panic came an idea like, oh my God, what if we could make a show that was entirely remotely produced? And what would that be like? And I got some thoughts together. And because I am on a text chain with Jenji and the Orange is the New Black writers, and we, just text each other goofy stuff, I texted them on the 16th or 17th. I was like, guys, I have a crazy idea. And they know me. I have a lot of crazy ideas. I'm like, I have a crazy idea. Do you want to get on Zoom tomorrow and like talk about it and see if I'm crazy? And they were all like, Zoom? What's that? Because that was, March. And everyone's like, how do we use the Zoom? And we got on Zoom, and they're like, no, that's really cool. And then we sort of met informally on Zoom, like every couple of days, and sort of cooked something up. And then I remember one night, I sort of woke up in the middle of the night, and I was like after a week of this, I'm like, someone's going to beat me to the punch here. Like, I have good ideas, but I'll have them like 2 years later. I'm like, damn, it would have been really fun to do that, or like, it's like when you're fighting with somebody and you're like, I should have said this. Like, so I was like, I think I, at least in the idea, probably got there first for once in my life. So let's if we're pitching it to Netflix, let's give them a heads up it's coming. And I emailed Jenji in the morning. No, I texted her in the morning. I was like, I'm paranoid that somebody, and she's like, she emailed Cindy Holland the night before. Cindy Holland was the head just until yesterday, the head of like all TV at Netflix. And, and Jenji can email Cindy Holland, and Cindy Holland's like, this sounds like the most exciting thing I've heard in months. And then 2 weeks later, I was pitching Netflix on Zoom, of course. And it was wild. It was, I knew sort of from the get-go that they were into it just by virtue of how many people showed up for the Zoom. when you start pitching a lot, you sort of know like, oh, I'm in a room with like the junior person or two junior people, or if you're in a room where people can just buy. And I was in a room with like lots of people. And part of it was maybe they didn't have much to do because it was still early pandemic days and everything was shut down. And part of it was like, if we're going to do it, the thought was at the time, let's do it fast because we want the show to be on before the pandemic's over. But now it's like, wow, we rushed real fast to, anyway, it's going to be a while. So they said yes right away. 2 weeks later, we had a writer's room up and running. And then we started shooting June 12th and we wrapped July 24th and we finished post last Friday. So we're done. It's coming soon. I'm not allowed to tell you the date, but social distance coming to Netflix very soon.
Did you shoot on Zoom? Like, is what we're seeing going to be all through the computer?
No.
Okay.
So the show is the point of view of the show is through the Internet of Connected Things. So there is one episode that is a Zoom episode, but we sent actors cameras. So that was part of the design of our show, that we were going to hire actors. We needed to find actors who lived with other actors often if we needed a scene with more than one person. Excuse me, for the Zoom episode, so like we had, we could have some single people in their little Zoom squares, but we weren't shooting from their laptop camera. We sent nicer cameras. Our camera package did change as we had designed a camera package. I was pitching it when I pitched a show to Netflix, when I pitched a show to actors, when we were doing the casting process. I'm like, oh, it's going to be like the Blue Apron of production. We're going to send you a little box. And it's going to be like, even a dummy could do it. And then these actors got the stuff and they were like, I had to lug a case up my stairs and it weighed 40 pounds.
I don't have an outlet in my apartment.
Yeah, they were like super overwhelmed. So we're like, we'll scale down. And then we scaled down to a different camera package and it was still overwhelming. And then we scaled down to iPhones, which looked beautiful. The iPhone 11 Pro is great. And we did it with, there's a more technical way to say it. We use Filmic Pro to somehow make the image look even better. And and then for our final episode, it was the only time we had any contact. We were allowed to have our camera people set up cameras exterior only in our actors' backyard, and they couldn't operate them. They could set them and leave them. So then we were back to our original super nice cameras. So going back to the show, the Internet of Connected Things. So one episode is Zoom, a lot of episodes at FaceTime. We have nanny cams, we have security cams, we have a lot of social media. We even have some virtual reality. And when we were breaking story, we had to figure, using that, it really determined how we would break story because we couldn't tell stories in the normal way. We couldn't tell stories in the normal way because in the normal way you have an actor interacting with other actors, and all we could do is have actors interacting with people in their homes. That's all we were allowed to do. So so that was a challenge, but we did it.
Going back to your pitch, so what did you prepare to, usually so much of the energy of a pitch is in the room and vibing off of people and really just feeling the energy of the room. How was pitching on Zoom? And did you have things to present, or how did you go about it?
Well, actually our producing director, after I was done with my story pitch, he did the whole visual pitch, it's like the Internet of Connected Things, and he showed examples. At that point, Saturday Night Live was doing stuff, and I think the Parks and Rec episode had already been done real quickly. And he's like, it's going to be like this, but we're going to do it better, and it's going to be like that, but we're going to do something. And or that in-screen movie Searching, we had stills of stuff that we showed as a reference. But pitching on Zoom versus pitching in the room, I'll say two things. Thing one is, before the pandemic, just in pitching in general, for me, now it's different for everybody, but I found my sweet spot when it comes to pitching, which is I write out my pitch. I write it like a document that a person could read. And then for my own sake, I make it into bullet points and, so it's like a cheat sheet, like note cards. But my move pre-pandemic was to put it on my phone. So I'd have a pitch on my phone and I would tell the people like, oh, I'm not texting during this meeting. I just, I feel better if it's here. Because when I would go into a pitch and have everything memorized, I was always like stiff and like worrying I was going to forget something. But if I just had it here, all I would need to do is be like, okay, we open the scene and she's in the car, and then I'd be like, cut to, blah, 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 and it just was like my little cheat sheet. So doing it on Zoom was essentially the same thing, but even better because I just had a pitch this afternoon, actually. I just pitched a show for something else. What you do is like, you're looking at the camera at the person, but right underneath it is your thing. So you're just like scrolling. I mean, you can see my hand now, but you can't when I'm really scrolling, or you can a little, but who cares? Like, and so I'm just like reading and customizing it to make it look like it's extemporaneous, because no one wants to hear you read. That's really boring. So
I couldn't tell at all.
Right. And so, yeah. So anyway, that was my key to pitching. And so it was sort of like what I was doing before the pandemic, and it was fine. I mean, I think, yeah, for sure, Zoom is not as great as being in person. We know this, right? Everybody knows this. It's like, there's something you get about being with people, but for me, it feels like the pressure's off because you can totally use your cheat sheet. But he knows it. And you can share visuals in a way that, yeah, gets people excited, I think.
I love that. I kind of going off of your process and everything. How has your writing process changed from being in quarantine? I mean, just even interacting with the other writers on your show, how do you all collaborate now? And is it easier or harder?
Well, for the writer's room, what we found, and I know, I talked to I have other writer friends who are on shows and they're doing it very differently, but I feel like the way we did it was the way to go. We did 3-hour days, which I know sounds like nothing, but being in the writer's room can be exhausting, and being on Zoom is really exhausting too. But we would work from 1 to 4, maybe 1 to 4:30, and we would just really work. So the thing we lost was like all the goofing around and all the sort of like personal, I mean, there were still personal stories. Like being in a writer's room is a very intimate space because it's sort of like being at the therapist's office / being at a dinner party. Like people are, I don't know, what we write is informed by our lives. So people are like, well, when my sister got divorced and then, and like, you're just like in this whole thing. And, so there was a little less of like, I mean, there was still that, but it just didn't go on for quite as long because we knew it was like, being on Zoom is so intentional. Like every bit of time is so intentional because you're like setting up an appointment. Whereas being in the room, you could digress and, yeah, you could just go a lot of different places, or off at, you go and get a snack together, or like, let's get coffee, or like somebody pulls up a funny YouTube. And like, we did do some of that, but it was just different. And Zoom got a little better as we were in the room doing it. Like at first you couldn't really talk over each other at all. So there was also that. But the advantage we had in the room for social distance is most of us were writers from Orange is the New Black, and we had worked together for the last several years. So we had a real shorthand with each other, which was super helpful. So that, yeah. And then in terms of the writing itself, I mean, I'm fortunate. I think actually this experience of being on the reality show. So when we were on the reality show, we would have to, the challenges would be like, they would show up at our place and be like, you're going to do like a comedy script or a horror script, and it has to be written by tomorrow morning. And we want 3 options. So like at 11 o'clock at night, you're like, I have till 9 a.m. to write 3 short films. And we didn't have any internet, because like we could have theoretically like cheated on the show, I guess. So, but not having internet as a writer is a gift. It's a gift from the gods. So I got really good at being disciplined because there was no like, I'm just going to check my email. Like you couldn't do it. And I'm certainly not as disciplined, but I think just knowing that I could do that I could be that disciplined. I'm pretty disciplined when it comes to writing. It's the only thing I'm disciplined with. But yeah, it's hard in the pandemic, especially, the rhythm of our lives. When I was doing the show, that was very busy and that was good. But now that I'm in like normal pandemic mode, it's a slower pace, right? Like there's no real urgency. I mean, there are people who have jobs, there's urgency that are so
Right.
going places, like,
Right.
but if you're a freelancer like me, I'm like, okay, well, I should write today, but why don't I wait till I, yeah. But yeah, I mean, once I sit down and do it, then I'll do it.
You
Like,
get into, yeah.
Yeah. That hasn't changed for me really at all.
Yeah. I struggle with, I put too much pressure on myself, and then I sit down, I'm like, I'm going to write something. And then once I start doing it, it's nothing. It's like complete gibberish. So I kind of on that note, how do you get out of writer's slump personally? Like, especially when you're confined to being in your home for most of the time.
Yeah. I have not suffered from writer's block, or maybe I do, but I just don't define it that way. For me, it's not that I don't hit, a wall when I'm writing something, but I know enough. I've been doing it for so long that for me, there's never a time where I'm like, I don't know what to do next. I have writer's block. For me, that's a signal that I need to go take a walk. And that's something that we can still do during the pandemic, get your mask ready and go. And I like to walk anyway, and it clears your head, or go take a bike ride, or do whatever your favorite physical activity is. That to me, I feel like some of the best work I do at writing is when I walk away from the computer.
Yeah.
Because if you can't figure something out, you're going to figure it out on your bike ride. You will figure it out. Or you'll figure it out by quitting early for the day and sleeping on it. And the other trick, it's not really a trick, but the other thing I do when when I know something's not right, is that I'll write it anyway. I'll write a shitty version of it.
Yeah.
Like, to not be afraid to write something that's not good. Like, you're writing a scene, you're like, oh, this just feels forced, or this, like, something about it, like it's too close to that, or like, but if it's in between like a good scene and another scene, you know what you're going to do with, and then there's this like crappy scene, just write the crappy scene, move on, and then circle back later, because writing is rewriting. You're going to circle back a million times. So it's okay. Do you
call it a vomit draft too? Because I call it that, and my boyfriend's like, stop saying that.
Yeah,
That's
no,
gross.
no, it's a thing. People call it a vomit draft. I mean, yes, I have a mantra to myself that I just don't want to. I can sometimes do things really fast. I want to personally slow down my process a little bit, because TV writing, you get trained to write really quickly because you have deadlines, because, you're in production, that this episode preps on this day, and you better show up at the production meeting with the production script, and production draft. And so you can start producing the show. And so you get trained to work really quickly. And I am capable of doing good work really quickly, but I think I'm also, like, when I'm not on deadline for a show, just doing my own work. I just don't want to fly through something. I personally just need to slow down as a human. So that is my thing. But yeah, vomit drafts are so common, because I've written them a million times, because it's so much better to be like, aha, I have 111 pages of a feature. It's terrible, but I have like, look, it's a feature. And then you have something to work with. It's better than, like, the process of creating it out of thin air can feel really daunting, but when you have something, then you can just make it better. Yeah. So I just think you gotta free yourself up to don't be precious about your words, like, because you can't be precious about them in television or in film.
No, they're going to get changed.
Anyway, they're going to get changed. They're going to get changed. Or your best scene. I mean, I remember my first script for Orange is the New Black, and God, I can't even remember I remember what the original scene is. So the opening scene, and I was like working so hard. Like, the opening scene, you typically work so hard on, because you just keep going, you start there. So you just keep going back, and it's the beginning. You don't want people to lose interest. And I think I was like 1 week into, so you have 2 weeks usually to write hour-long drama script. And I was maybe 1 week into my first Orange script. And this is when you're at a new job, you're still like, oh, are they going to read this and fire me? Like, you don't know what's going to happen. And so I was like, had written the vomit draft, was like back on that scene. It was like, oh, this scene is so good. And I get a text from Tara saying, oh, we can't, I don't even remember the reason why, but we can't shoot either with that actor, we can't shoot this, or the whole first scene is changing. It was not, no one had read my draft because it was irrelevant because of whatever reason. And there was no arguing the reason. It was just like, this is now happening. Because that happens all the time in TV.
Yep.
So I was just like, oh, okay. So you can't get precious about anything. So that whatever that was got thrown out. And then I had to be like I'm going to quote one of my colleagues and writers on Social Distance and Orange. We did something with Anthony Natoli, who's great. And he went, oh, now I have to be brilliant again. And he was kidding, but it was really funny. Like, but that's how it feels. You're like, you've given everything to this thing and then like it's thrown out.
Yeah.
That's how the real world works. So
for completely subjective reasons.
Yeah, for subjective reasons. Or you write a thing and like, oh, we can't shoot there, you know, like, or you write a scene 17 times because it's like, well, we can't shoot at that location. Okay, I'm going to write the whole thing over and now make all the jokes about the fact that we're in a church. Like all the church. Oh, we're not in a, can't use the church. Okay, and like, and you start all over again. So why be precious about anything?
Right.
I just think it's a good lesson to, you know. Yeah, I mean, you want to fight for the hills that are worth dying on, but you don't always get to control that. Even if you're in charge of the show, you don't always get to control it.
Absolutely. So. Kind of switching gears. Obviously, you're writing a show that is like super prevalent to what's going on right now, and it's going to hit home for so many people. Yeah. And I know I speak from experience by saying, you know, my reps have pushed me to change my concepts to fit in the issues and the movements that are going on right now, COVID, all of the different movements. And I guess my question is, what do you recommend in that vein? Do you usually say always try and keep your concepts reflective of what's going on in the world, or do you not recommend pushing concepts into your already written bodies of work that don't feel natural?
I mean, I think it's just an individual thing, and every piece of work is going to, you know, have a different answer. Like I'll have another, the thing that Netflix passed on before Social Distance is now with another production company, and it takes place in the 1960s. So it doesn't have to address COVID, obviously, but it does address, it's in the 1960s. There's, you know, immigration, there's racism. It takes place in the South in the 1960s. So like and women's rights. So what, you know, the benefit you get doing something that takes place in the past is you have the wisdom of today to sort of like amp up the issues that, you know, wow, like, yes, women are allowed to wear pants now, but like also we're still oppressed, you know, like, and there's a way to like put that in there without it being like, this is it's not the message of the show, it's a story. But so anyway, it really depends on the work. And like writing something contemporary, the thing I just pitched today is a contemporary story. It didn't even come up, but like for me, I would set it a few years before COVID. I would probably set it, you know, like during the Obama presidency, because everything was less fraught. You could just have a moment that just felt like it existed in time without it being too expensive, because it's a period piece. That's why people don't want to do a period piece. It's too expensive. So I don't know. Yeah, it just depends. But I think where you fail is when you're like, I've got to make this relevant. I mean, you look at so many like TV shows that are, you know, like a network TV show where it's like, we've got to have a diverse cast. And so like, it just looks so like, I don't know, it doesn't feel very organic. I think the trick is to make it organic to your story. So, and I think now, you know, I think a lot of people want to escape. I don't think they necessarily want to live in, I mean, it's hard to live in this world. I mean, in my show, Social Distance, like obviously it takes on a lot of what's happening now, but it's not about the pandemic per se. It's just about the distance between people and how we're all sort of coping with it. And my hope is that it'll be cathartic, but I don't think everything has to be focused on that. Like, I mean, I think just trust your gut on it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually one of our Q&A questions. And one of our participants would like to know, do you think the pandemic will have a permanent effect on the writing process going forward? And do you think there'll be more work from home and geographic flexibility for working writers? This is coming to you as the original work from home in New Hampshire writer.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like, you know, I feel like when this is all over, will I want to go back to a writer's room and be in person with people? Absolutely. But will I also want to like make less of a carbon footprint, or, you know, just not have to commute in traffic every day? I think there's certainly like a combination. And what I'm also finding is that people are into the Zoom meetings. Like they're not, you know, if you have to pitch something, it's like, now I'm driving to Burbank, now I'm driving to Santa Monica. Like, if you could just sit here in your office and do those meetings, yeah, like I think everyone in Hollywood's into that. And I also think it opens up a possibility for writers who live in different places, you know, that you don't have to live in Los Angeles. You can work on a show from a different place, which is great.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, I mean, I think that would be a nice effect of all of this, something we'd want to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it definitely is opening up doors for multiple stories. And I mean, clearly, you know, if I may, you're show running from home. And so do you feel like this is on a show that's not shot remotely like yours is? Do you think being a showrunner from a different location would ever work?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it really depends. Like, I think that there are people that like to spend, well, I mean, I spent time on set, you know, via Zoom. But there are some showrunners that never go to set, you know. I mean, it was my first show. I think I'm like, yeah, I don't need to, for my first show, I felt the need to sort of be there for all the stuff. But I think moving forward, you hire directors you trust. Like, I don't think I need to be there every second. But wait, what was your first question? The being
just
sorry, I feel like I went off topic.
No. If you feel like if someone was to sell a show and they lived elsewhere and like, you know, across the world, could they still be in the, or maybe this is a good opportunity because a couple people have asked, just can you describe the role of showrunner and what your day-to-day job is really?
Yeah, you know, show running for this show in particular, I think was a good first show running experience, but it was different in a lot. I mean, it was different because nobody saw each other, but it was different in a lot of other ways too. We had a smaller crew. We had a shorter schedule than most shows because we were trying to, Netflix was trying to get it ready. You know, we realized pretty quickly that a lot of the communication, you know, in the TV world, there's a series of meetings that, you know, like there's a series of drafts that get delivered. It's all very regimented and everybody knows what the steps are, that the writer's draft, and then you get notes, and then you write another draft, and then that gets ready for the network draft, and the network gives you notes, you know, and all these little stages, and then you start prepping off the production draft. Anyway, and then you have your shooting script, and then, you know, if there are changes, and you get blue pages and yellow pages. I'm doing them in the wrong order probably, but anyway, you get like, it's all like, they're all and it's on a schedule. You know, once the train leaves the station, it's moving along. But what we didn't, and there are all these meetings that you have, but what we didn't realize is how much communication happened like in the van on the way to a location scout, or just like walking in the production office and getting another donut in the kitchen. And then you're like, oh, hey, you have a side conversation with the director. So that in-person stuff, I think we all missed. Yeah. And it was a little harder to do, but we eventually found a groove, you know, with Zoom. The director would speak privately to actors in a green room or a breakout room on Zoom, and there were text chain going. So I feel like I got close to some directors through just going to the breakout room with them, and also through the text chain, because like you're mostly working, but sometimes you like slide in a joke and like make it a little more human. But the role of a showrunner is really just to, you know, oversee the show, about, you know, what the show is about, to oversee all the scripts, so that when drafts are delivered, it's, you know, the showrunner's purview to rewrite the scripts if necessary, or to ask the writers to rewrite the script to, you know, where the showrunner wants them to be. The showrunner is involved with casting, hiring the crew, although the line producer, it does some of that, does most of that, but you know, choosing directors, working with those directors. Part of showrunning is having a tone meeting to sort of go through the tone of each episode with the director, and then overseeing all of post-production. And so yeah, it's running the show. But the thing that's so great about working with Tilted and working with Jenji Kohan and Tara Herman is that they've been doing this a long time, and they have a team of people within Tilted, so that it, really my job, like I wasn't like, oh, I've got to, I don't know, I'm sure there were a lot of like side conversations, but they had people in place to be like talking to Netflix about this and that, or, I mean, I talked to Netflix too, of course, but I think there were, yeah, it's good to have a team, and so that you're not like doing everything all alone. And I think most showrunners aren't. I mean, you have your line producer, you have your post-production producer, and it's such a collaborative thing, working in television. You're never doing it alone. But yeah, I mean, doing it over the computer, a lot of the meetings just felt like a real meeting, like a concept meeting with all the department heads, but instead of sitting around a table, you're sitting in a Zoom and you're going through the episode page by page, figuring out how you're gonna do it. If you're like, well, how are we gonna do this shot? How are we gonna do, how are we gonna pull this off? And then everyone chimes in. So yeah, it's kind of the same.
Yeah. It's a lot of wrangling, it sounds like.
A lot of wrangling, yes. A lot of email. More emails than you have ever seen in your life.
Yes. Well, a bunch of our people joining today are in support staff positions, or people who are obviously trying to get in as support staff positions. Have you had any experiences on all the shows that you've worked on a support staff who went above and beyond? What did they do? How did they share their work with you? What was the appropriate way to say, I know you're a co-EP on this show. Can I slip you my script? What have you seen?
Yeah, I think that kind of thing is easier to do in person than to, like some of the, like our writer's assistants, the way we did it in our room on social distance, and it's the way they do it on Orange, is that we had a writer's assistant and a script coordinator who switched jobs, like they both did each job. And then for this show, in addition, they were each like Jill was my personal assistant, Brandon was also Tara Herman's personal assistant, and they split script coordinating it. So that's a different case, but like my assistant and Jill, who is our writer's assistant, like she just did such an amazing job, knocked it out of the park. I had read one of her scripts before because I knew her from Bones when she was an intern, but I was like, let me read another one of your scripts. I want to give you notes, like, because she's somebody I want to help, right? Because she did such a great job. She deserves it. And then, well, Brandon, we gave a script. He wrote the final episode, so that was good. Yeah. And then I know Jill, my assistant, she asked another writer if he would read her script. And then when the show was, it just ended this Friday, like we're all off the payroll for the show. She was like, I'm going to like ask people if they know of work. I'm like, that's completely fine. They're going to want to hear from you. It really, I think, depends on the goodwill that you've extended. Like on the other hand, there was somebody I worked with on a show. I won't say which show. She was one of the crew people on the show, and I didn't know her super well, but like we had a fun, and she's like, oh, can my son reach out to you with, he wants to be a writer. I'm like, okay. And then he did, and he sent a script, and I'm like, I'm going to be a nice guy and I'm going to read the thing. And then just like 2 weeks ago, he sent me like he's like, here's my feature. I was like, dude, I read a script for you. I gave you notes, like, and talked to him and gave him advice. Like, you got to read the room, you just got to like, because I like helping young writers, but I just think I think it's all about personal connections. If there's somebody that you feel like you have a connection to, then ask them. And the other thing is too, this is the number one mistake I made when I was young and breaking in. If someone offers, because I recently offered to read some writers' scripts. Like I found some people on Twitter because I'm just trying to like support writers of color and so more. And so I reached out to some people, and then someone's like, I was afraid to send you that. I'm like, I asked you. So if I ask you, then you're not bugging me. Like, just do it. And the other thing is just be short and sweet. Like I remember like breaking in like composing emails, it would take me like an hour to write 3 sentences because I wanted to be so hilarious. Like when you're on the receiving end as a showrunner, you have so many goddamn emails. You don't care. You just want to be like, what do you want from me? Oh, this? Okay, yes or no. Like, don't dazzle me. Like, you're not going to dazzle me in an email. It's not possible. Like, I don't have time, you know? So I just think cut to the chase, ask for what you want, but ask for someone who you think might be receptive. And if they're not receptive, that's okay. You know, if they don't answer you, that's their way of saying no, you know, but you can gently nudge them again if you want. I don't know. But I think it's okay. Yeah. Ask the people you're close to that you work with and see what they say, but be clear about what you're asking for. That's the other thing. You know, a lot of people are like, will you read my thing? And I'm like, why? You know, what, like, do you need notes or do you, are you looking to get staffed or like, be clear. Be clear. And also don't blow your opportunity by getting someone who's like higher up in this business to read something that's not ready, because that's your opportunity. So
did you ever do the cold email, cold contact? I know I did when I first moved to LA. I, got a hold of a bunch of people's emails, especially BU alum. And I was like, hi, like, I'm Amy, like, blah, 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 blah. Are those annoying to people in position like you? Or does it show someone who's proactive and is taking their career seriously?
I think it just depends on the mood and on the person. I think, believe me, I know what it's like to be desperate and wanting to break in and looking for anything. And you're like, oh, this person went to BU and I read that they lived at Warren Towers and I lived in Warren Towers. Like, I'm going to be like, we're soulmates, like, obviously, like, I don't know, whatever, but whatever, like, angle you have, it's tempting. And I think maybe it can sometimes work. Like, I try to be polite. I try to encourage people. I try to talk to people, but like also there's only so much time I have in a day. And a friend of mine who, she's like my age and she's made some like real documentaries. It was like talking to me the other day. Oh, she wanted my advice on something. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give her my advice.
Yeah.
We're not that good friends, but I was like, okay, yeah. Like I'm friends enough that like I can take 20 minutes to like give her my 2 cents. And then she's like, she has a really good friend who's a really successful showrunner right now. And she's like, and I keep emailing her, but like, we used to be really good friends and da-da. And I was like, here's what I didn't understand till I had my own show. It's the volume of emails, the amount of like, I mean, right now I'm fine. Not a lot is going on, but like when I was running my show, I mean, I would have to answer like a million questions every minute. And like to get someone being like, hey, hi, I don't want to work on your show, but I was just like, I mean, not that my friend's email was saying this, but like just asking for some vague amorphous thing, like, oh, because you were high level in TV and I want to get right on another show. What can you do for me? Like, unless I know that other person, I can't do anything for you, you know?
It's not like we're all under the same GE umbrella.
No, it's not like we're all having like a pajama party on Friday night. Like I don't know. I mean, but if I know somebody, I'll do something, but it's really hard if there's not a specific ask to know how to help people other than just giving them generalized advice.
Yeah. And kind of on that note, rejection and someone saying no to you or someone saying, no, I can't help you, or no, you're not ready, or X, Y, and Z. How did you handle that when you were kind of our age and in our positions? I mean,
listen, handling it is not over just because I have a show. Like, here's the thing of it. Like Genji, who is like one of I would say the famous showrunners that exist. Yeah. After Weeds, Weeds was really big for Showtime. It was the biggest show they had ever had at the time. And she pitched them Orange is the New Black and they passed. And, they were wrong, obviously, right? And then Netflix was new and everyone's like, Genji, what are you doing? And then obviously the rest is history. But I think that people, there's so much rejection in this business. I've approached it a lot of different ways. I try to just lean into it and be sad, like there are a lot of really successful writers with shows that they pitch a show or they make a pilot and it doesn't go to series and it all just dies. Or they make a thing and it's not as good as the last thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it's great and nobody watches it. I've seen all of those examples, you know. I mean, I worked on Kidding with Jim Carrey and Michelle Gondry. I mean, these are two, you know, great talents. And like nobody watched that show, you know. It was like, I love the show, but it was too weird for most people. So like nothing is a given. I don't know. Like you just like, so Jim Carrey got rejected, right?
Right.
Like, which he has before, just like every A-list star has before.
Yeah.
Everyone, like, think of, you know, as I'm getting ready to have my show out in the world, and I think people are going to like it. I'm really proud of it. I think people are going to be into it, but
It's going to be great.
You never know. Right. And so, but you know, yeah, just think of like, you know, when they announced Ben Affleck as Batman, like how many people are just like furious, or like, you know, they're female Ghostbusters, like, and it's like the world is falling apart and people are just angry, you know. That's a kind of rejection too. So you know, like that's this business, and you just have to be like, next thing. It's about the next thing. It's about not being precious. We've all had projects we care about die, never to be seen again. Oh well, next thing. You'll think of something else you love. So
yeah. And learning how to pivot, obviously, like Genji did, and just picking yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah, absolutely. You always have to pivot, and you always have to have a lot of projects. Like if you go onto IMDb, well, I don't know if they do this on IMDb, but on IMDb Pro, where if you pay like $14 a month or whatever it costs, you can see what everyone has in development. And you're like, huh, why, you know, all of these really big people have all these projects that they're trying to get sold. Like they're not all going to sell. So, you just have to have a lot going on. You have to have the thing you're working on, and the thing that, you know, you're ready to take out, and the thing that you finished a few years ago that never got any traction, and the new thing that you're trying to get the rights to. It's just how everyone operates. And, you know, there's a lot of hustle involved in it. And some people do more or less of that, you know. Some people don't like it. I kind of like it. And there are writers that are just like, oh, it's exhausting, and they just want to write one thing. So, you'll find which one you are, and you'll do that.
In the downtime between projects, did you find yourself taking on other work or making compromises, being like, okay, I guess I'll do copywriting work, like, you know, X, Y, and Z, fill in the blank?
When I was young, for sure, I did you know, I was making my indie feature films. And before I got work in documentary TV, I did every job known to man. Like I worked as a receptionist to a private investigator in Boston, and I got to go on stakeouts. But let me tell you, all of that stuff, those crappy jobs, that was not a crappy job. I mean, I did get paid like $10 an hour or something, but like all of those jobs, they become stuff that like in the writer's room, people are like, you did what? You know, and you know a thing because you did that crappy job. Or like, you know, I was a world's worst waitress in Boston when I went to college, but I worked at Gihama on Boylston, which I know is now closed. And I worked at, they had another restaurant in Faneuil Hall. But anyway, I mean,
I was fired from Sunset Cantina on campus, so I feel you.
Nice, yeah. So I mean, all of those things, those life experiences are what we write about. So I don't think you should ever feel like, oh, I've done this other thing in between. I'm a barista, I'm a this, I'm a that. Like that is what's getting you life experience. You know, it's the thing that I think coming into a writer's room as a staff writer in my early 40s, that like people were like, how do you know that? I'm like, because I'm 40, like, because I've done, you know, like I've done stuff like, and I think that, I don't know, that's really helpful. But there's nothing, I mean, fortunately right now, I don't have to like take stuff that I don't want to do in between jobs. I mean, I guess there could be a future where I would have to again, because it's, you know, it's Hollywood, but I think I'm in a place now where it feels fairly secure. And but it can take a while till you get there. And, you know, there are even really established writers that it's sort of a game of musical chairs come staffing season. And, you know, I know people have been in writing for TV for 30 years that like have sat a couple seasons out just because they didn't get a chair in the musical chairs. And so, you know, hopefully you get a script, like you write a pilot, sell a pilot. And once you're in the game with like agent and manager and you get more established, that stuff just comes more easily to you. it's hard to explain. And I'm still having, it's interesting. I know these are champagne. It's not a problem. It's champagne problems. It's not even a problem at all. But like, I'm like, oh, now I get to be more choosy. Like I've been offered recently stuff that like, even a year ago, I would have been like, sure, I'll do that. But I'm like, no, not that. So, you know, you get a little bit more juice and you get to be more choosy, which is great.
Totally.
That's the dream, right? So.
Yeah, that is the dream. And for people who are coming in, you know, they're not a young writer. They're not fresh off the boat from college who will take any PA job. Yeah. Maybe they've worked in the industry in a different capacity, but they're a writer. I mean, have you seen that? Like, how is that?
Yes.
How did that process look for the people that you know?
I mean, we had a writer when I started Orange, Merritt Tierce, who she is a novelist. She had never worked or lived in Hollywood. And she's a brilliant novelist. And like her first TV script was brilliant because she's really smart. So I think that, yeah, you can, I mean, it was still writing to writing, but I think it's a lot harder to write a novel. I say this having written one, you know, young adult novel, like it's harder to write a novel than it is to write a script. And and, you know, I know other people like who were former lawyers. I know at least three writers who used to be lawyers. And like, it's not like they went straight out of law school to like writing their first script. They learned like all of us are learning, you know, but people come from all different worlds, and that's what makes a writer's room richer. And then there are some people that like come in, they're an assistant, then they're a writer, and then they just, you know, do the thing. But I think for most people, the journey is, you know, it's not very linear.
Last question. For those of us out there who are interested in being showrunners, and we know that we want to be in charge one day, what are the steps that we can be taking in the room now as either support staff or younger writers on a show, or even not even staffed anywhere or working anywhere? What are the steps that we can be doing with our own projects that we want to be pitching to present ourselves like people who could run a show one day?
I honestly think it's just experience in the writer's room. Like, I mean, I had the benefit of having experience, like, so running my first show, like I had experience producing 2 feature films that I told you about that were very tragic at the time, but like I'd sat through color corrections, you know, I'd sat through sound mixes. I knew what that stuff was, you know, and we got to do that stuff even when I was on Bones, and not on Kidding, but on Orange, we got to sit through that process as well. And there were some writers who were like, what's happening here? And like, I knew all of that. So yeah, having some production experience helps, I think, but you don't need it because you can learn it. But I think the more time you spend working on TV shows and being in the writer's room, it's just a leadership job. I think if you worked at a camp, you know, you could probably be a showrunner, like, right? I think it's like, there are other things that translate because it's so different than writing. So I would say if you're not yet in the room, focus on being a good enough writer so that you write a script that is going to get you in a room. Like, it's always just about the writing. And, you know, as you start working, once you have that great script and now you're in a writer's room and you're, you know, a staff writer or even a writer's assistant, well, I guess a staff writer, because once you go through the process of production of a script, typically in writer's rooms, you get to produce your episodes. Then you're seeing everything you need, almost everything you need to know as a showrunner. You're seeing all the process, you know, how it works in production. Every time you do it, you learn more, but everybody's learning more. No one has all the answers. That's why there's so many people at the table, right? Because everyone has their area of expertise. So.
Totally. I love it. Well, that is pretty much the end of our time. Thank you, Hilary, so much. You shared so much great wisdom with us. And thank you guys for all the great questions. I want to thank everyone who tuned in today, and special thanks to our many donors for supporting all of the BU programs. For all of our future events, please visit bu.edu/alumni/events. And you can find lots of career resources on the BU alumni website by following bu.edu/alumni/careers. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks,
Thank you, Hilary.
Amy. Thanks. Bye, you guys.
Bye.